Welcome to the InStory show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host, and our theme this season is what does it mean to expand into a new story? And how do you stop hiding your spiritual gifts and dare to be seen for who you really are by saying yes to your soul and telling your story? So today I am thrilled to welcome Robyn Mcclendon. Hi, Robyn.
Hey, Devorah, it's good to be here again. Thank you for inviting me.
I know, it's so fun. I get to have some people back, and you're one of them.
Thank you. I love being here with you.
All right, I'm going to read a little bit about you and we will dive in. Hovering on the liminal edges of visual anthropology, Robyn Mcclendon is a rare bird, an artist whose work weaves together the unseen and the ancient. With over 3 decades as a Reiki Master, she channels an intimate understanding of energy, frequencies, vibrations, and sacred symbology into every facet of her creative practice. Her art is not simply to be viewed, it is to be experienced. It exists as a vessel for transformative transmission, engaging body, mind, and spirit in the same way ancestral symbol-based practices once did. For Robyn, art is not a thing. It is a frequency. And to make art with her is to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Oh, I just love that. All
Thank
right,
you.
my dear. Tell us a little bit about what does expanding into a new story mean to you?
Certainly, because I am right in this place of expanding into a new story, Devorah. It's crazy. First of all, it's scary. It is scary. It's not an easy turn that we make. So I have to put my hand up to that one. For me, having been a visual artist, mixed media artist. My background is in, cultural anthropology. And so my art always came out of the expression of cultures and symbols and things like that. And I've built a pretty big audience platform around all of this. I have a best-selling book with Schiffer Publishing on a mixed media technique. But for the last few years, the mother has been calling. And to me, the mother is Gaia. She's the earth mother. And she's talked to me for years, but she really wants me to step back on more of a spiritual awakening path that I had been on around 2018 or so. I had a community, I had a podcast called Conversations with Gaia. And then I kind of flipped and went a little bit more back the arty way. And for a few years, she's been saying, no, let's go back. Let's really go back. And I have been listening, but I have been thinking, well, yeah, but I have this community. I've built all this up. How do I switch things around? We that stuff started happening. And this is how I make my living. So what's going to happen? I need more of a plan, mama. They don't really want to give you no plans when it's time to expand. So it's been a real journey. And I just got back from Scotland and Ireland, and the whole point of that was I was going to a lot of the stone circles, a lot of the sacred sites. I really wanted to connect with the earth mother and the energies and the frequencies that the planet is expanding around now. I have My background is in geomancy, as well as of course we talked about Reiki. And so I was feeling the energies of the planet. The mother was talking to me, and I was doing that because I felt like I needed to reset. And
Mhm.
that trip really helped me to now step into this little scary place that she has me moving. I know the waters well because I've done it a lot in my own life. So many people in my art community are saying, Robyn, I know there's some spiritual stuff behind your things. Can you share? And yet, with all of that, Deborah, I've still had reticence, even
Mhm.
though I've been a Reiki master for more than 30 years, da 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 da. So, I guess where I would want to start this conversation with, it's really not about how much you know or not know. It's not even about, you could be very clear on your path or not so clear. Sometimes during this time period where the frequencies are so locked in and time is so locked in, just turning those gears to try to shift, that's the challenge. That is the challenge. But I do believe we're moving into times, especially going into the end of the year, where the veil is thinning, the frequencies are lifting. I felt it in Scotland all over the place. Going to those sacred sites, I could really feel the elasticity of the grid. And so this is a good time, and I'm just stepping into it now. Like sometimes you just have to fall into like we do as a kid, like not quite sure what's going to happen. But what I do know, every time I have fallen into stuff, I've been supported in it. And that much I know to be a fact. So we don't always know the whole plan, but
But I think this is part of the expansion is that we are supported from these higher realms where it used to be we had to only be supported from structures in this
right.
world, like from experts, from schools, from things like that. And now this expansion involves trusting this higher knowing,
Yes.
these higher frequencies, like so that someone else said, you don't get to necessarily know the how when you start to expand. It's like, oh, okay.
You're never going to know the how. That is a fact, it seems. Yeah, it's interesting because when I was in Ireland, because from when I was still in Scotland, and was with a few other ladies, and we had gone to a store that carries the stones and everything. Because she was looking for some stones, I was looking for a terminated rutilated quartz specific, and I've been having a hard time finding it terminated. But we were in there, and this other guy came walking in, and he knew the store owner, and they were talking back and forth, and my friend, she was getting like a quick tarot reading from the guy because they were talking back and forth and what have you. And anyhow, the guy that came in was actually a Reiki master as well. He'd been for a long time, but he was just visiting. And at one point, he turns to me, and we, sort of introduced, and he says, "Gosh, you have come into this store with a whole team of ancestors. Do you know how many people are lined up behind you?" And I'm like, "I've been told that before." He says, "Oh, whatever shift you're going to be making, you have some serious support ready to go. And you're going to be bringing in some stuff that's coming through a lineage." And so that's an example of sometimes I'm sitting on the doubt fire, and this person who doesn't know me out of the blue is reading my aura, and he sees this. So that's like one of the way confirmation comes in. And we can
Right.
say, whatever. But it's really oftentimes going to be stuff like that we really do have to say, validate that as a synchronicity that I needed to hear.
Right. I think we need these little confirmations. I had a funny one just 2 days ago where this little bathroom that I used before my hike, the lock broke exactly when the ranger was there to unlock it and let me out and then fix it and make sure it got fixed so no one else got stuck. And I went, wow. Like
Yes.
just that reminder that we're being watched out for, that we have this extra higher level help, and that we get to begin more and more talking about it
Mm.
and trusting it and valuing it and trusting these confirmations. This is, I think, part of this expansion that it's not like we haven't talked about it before. It's just more,
Yes, more. It
I
is
think.
more. And for me, like what I call the mother Gaia, the Earth Mother. I always think of the mother as Mother Earth, Father Son. More in the indigenous traditions of those frequencies of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And so for me, the mother is what I most seem to, like I connect with. But it's interesting because I can definitely cite over the years where she would forewarn me, even going into the pandemic. I mean, she basically gave me dates. On my podcast, I would talk about it, but she gave me the date right down to March 13th, and she gave it to me back in the summer of 2019. And she kept on doing these day countdowns and countdowns. She said, "Look, make sure everything's in order. We're going to come out, but it's going to be a period of time that wherever you are, you're going to be stuck there. Whoever's in your life, whatever's in your life, whatever you're doing, you're going to be stuck in it. But we will come on the other side." And sure enough, we did. So you can oftentimes look back to things like that in your life where you had a knowingness.
Yes.
And yeah, and so you'll see that what you're connected with is actually communicating. It's not always like maybe what we want to hear or how we want to get it, but it is communication. So I always remember things like that to know that when you feel like you're getting ready to move into something, like you were saying, expand into something that feels a little scary, it's a little different, and maybe not something you've been doing. One suggestion I would make is kind of look back to see where you've done things in the past and you've got confirmations. And if it was working out then, it's going to work out now. It's like you were saying earlier, you're just never going to get the game plan entirely. And a lot of times it's because, to your opening statement, we have to line our frequencies up. And until you line your frequency up, you don't get in the door. It's like when you put a key in, until you line the key up with the tumblers, it's not you're not going to turn and open it. So our frequencies are like that. And if we have a frequency of doubt, a little bit of fear, things like that, but the path we're on doesn't have that frequency, we're not going to be able, we're going to keep on missing until we can align and say, you know what, I may have a little bit of doubt, but I'm gonna make that step. And taking that step is what creates the frequency lock in.
Right, I agree. So I would love if you would share a story or two that has been like a turning point for you that allowed you to really say yes to your higher calling, to what you really love to do.
I think the first thing for me has been what I just shared. One of them is definitely my relationship to the mother. She's always kind of told me things before they come, before they happen. And I've been very clear to see that. So I know that if I'm feeling that I have this connection and she's saying, Robyn, let's do more of helping people with, helping community with neuroregulation, with finding our story. My brand is art mythos, telling your stories visually. You don't have to be an artist to tell stories visually, right? But it's like turning back and making this bridge between spirituality and let's say reality. What we've taught right now is reality. And so when I look back at things like her, foretelling me about, the sort of lockdown and things like that, I know that it's a true connection. A lot of times, other like for instance, when I was in Scotland here, a lot of times when you go to the various sacred sites, the churches and things like that, there'll be a narrative, and that narrative is what the acceptable narrative is. But she's always shown me, no, it's not right here. Go out, walk down to the left, go around. And then when you go behind the site or around the site, you'll see something completely different. And when I douse for it, you'll find that this is really the sacred rock, or this is really where the frequency is much stronger than in the church, in the chapel. A good example of this, when I first, when I was in Scotland, we went to Rosslyn Chapel. So everybody knows Rosslyn Chapel from the Da Vinci Code, right? It was made famous by the Da Vinci Code. Well, Rosslyn Chapel is really old. It's at least I think in its current iteration, it's about 300 or 400 years old, I think, right now. It's pretty old. Um, and so that was a version that was in the chapel. Well, I'm there, I'm walking around the grounds, and people are inside, and I wasn't feeling the energy of like, oh, I was feeling energy like, there's just it's some other stuff going on in here. But so I get out and I walk around. So the mother says, walk around. As I'm walking around, I hear her say, I'm weeping. I'm weeping. And I couldn't hear anything but weeping. And I'm walking all the way around and what have you. And then the woman who gave, how when you're inside of a sacred site, they always sort of tell you the story. So I met back up with her and I said, let me ask you something. Like, I've noticed some anomalies. Like, this building seems like it's really old stuff with some new stuff. What's going on there? And I said, plus you have all of these fonts, but there's no water source. Where's the water source? So she told me, she says, well, the water source is down the road. And I'm like, don't they normally build sacred sites close to them so you could have, like, what were they lugging it up? And she said, yeah, they did. And I was looking at her, I'm like, and then she says to me, she says, listen, this is the third Rosslyn Chapel. The first two are down. She told me how to get to it. Go down past the cemetery. She said they're no longer there. You'll see some of the outcroppings of them, but that's where the original well is.
Wow.
Okay, so that's like the mother saying, so we know that that is a representation now, but the real earth energies, the real sacred point is down around, through a cemetery. So this is the kind of way that I find that she'll talk. So any of us that are on our journeys, if you just stop and listen and honor honor your feelings. I was there with other people who were saying, "Oh my God, I'm feeling the feelings," and I wasn't feeling anything. And so I'm thinking, so sometimes we have to honor ourselves, especially if
Right.
you're calling to expand in some areas that are sort of new and different. You're going to be a pioneer, and you're going to have to listen to yourself in that.
So I have a question about that though. You say like you listen to the mother and you really trust that and you get these things. But when did you start telling people that was true? Like a lot of times people get these things, but they don't tell anybody or they don't trust it. Like you,
Yeah.
the way you talk about that, that what you hear from the mother so confidently, I
Mhm.
want to know if there was a time when that wasn't so confident, clear and confident, and how did you come to really trust that so much and share it? Do you know what
Well,
I mean?
I
Like,
do know what you mean.
okay.
Well, I'm a little, I would, people who are wired like me will get it. Because I was always the oddball. I was always the one saying, I know you're like that too, Devorah, and probably much of our audience right now is you're always the one trying to tell someone something. They're like, oh, get out of here. Well, it's not that. So, you sort of start realizing that, I'm not probably going to be honored, so I'm not going to say anything until I can show or prove or do. Or sometimes we'll just say it and know, I put it out there. Some people will get it, some people won't. So for me, I always was kind of the oddball like that. And so I was used to sort of being sort of laughed or scoffed at. When I stayed on that path and I found that time and time again it bared itself out, like with the
Mm.
example of the Roslyn. I could have not asked the woman, but I knew something was different. And in asking her, I asked enough series of questions that she actually admitted that it wasn't the real chapel. Now, one of the people that I was with in the group, she was sort of leading the tour, really wonderful lady, and she was so open. She had taken people to that chapel before and didn't know that it wasn't the original one. And when I told her, she's like, "What? Are you kidding me?" So we all go traipsing and climbing over walls of cemeteries and stuff. We were allowed to do it, so we weren't, but and she's I never even knew this. So it's like saying things with a certain kind of understanding that it opened the door, like that tour guide decided to unlock, right? And say. So I think it's really knowing that you've been shown things before, even the smallest of times when something came up and you were proven right. I say that's what you have to go on. And it keeps on building confidence to now I know the voice of the mother. Um, it reminds me of I was raised as a Christian, so I'll use this analogy. I know in every denomination there is a similar thing, but the idea that my people know my voice and know the voice shall they follow. That's how I am with Gaia. Like I hear her voice, I know what it feels like in my body because it goes back to frequency, it goes back to resonance. Um, so one example, another example is that I've studied herbology, and the way I learned it from a very well-known herbologist in America. Her name is Feather Jones. She's in her 80s. She still goes to the Rockies and forages and stuff like that. She's amazing. But the way she taught us was we'd come up on a plant and she'd say, take a piece off, put a little bit in your mouth, taste it. Where's the first place you feel it hit? What's the first thing? What's the instinct? And every time, if you felt it in your stomach or if you felt a little something in your eye, she would say, okay, that's eye bright, or that's for this, that's for that. And so when you learn that things around us that seem inanimate or doesn't have higher consciousness actually speaks to you, you learn to say, when you hear a yes, that's a real yes. Like if you ask a question of nature, if you ask a tree, can I hug you, you're going to get a yes or you're going to get a no. It'll happen immediately. You don't even have to guess about it. And if it's a no, it's because it's not right now. Maybe there's a biome, maybe there's ants, maybe it's something that it doesn't want disrupted. And so we honor that. And I think what happens is that as human beings, we've been taught to make things so complicated. We've grown up in an educational system that says prove it, prove it, prove it, that we feel that when we go back to become connected with ourselves and understand our own frequency, we still are in this prove it mode, but we don't have to be because the answers come like lightning. And it's learning to go back and understand that and respect that.
I agree with you. And this is this idea of other ways of knowing.
Yes,
Right, because that's exactly what you're saying. It's not the prove it, the show the right answer on the test, comply it, and we're being pulled, I think, to this more expanded realm and
yeah.
trusting, which is kind of what you started out saying in terms of your own sense of expanding, which I think ends up being for a lot of us an integration.
It is. It is that's a very good point, Devorah. It is like an integration back into ourselves, right? It's like this divine circle. It's like the labyrinth. You're right. I like that. Yeah, because it does when and isn't that what happens actually in nature when things expand? It'll go to a point and then it may collapse and it'll recollect and then expands more. It goes in on itself. That is the cycle of sort of the electromagnetic realm that we live in. So that's a really good point there. Yeah, I agree.
Right, because you're saying like you've done all, you were doing all the spiritual work and then you did all this art and now the spiritual's calling you. Well, of course, that's because they go together.
They go together.
They
Yeah.
go together.
And I've
And the
tried my darndest to keep it separate.
right, but forget that.
Yeah, it's useless. And it's primarily because, you know, we live in a world where everybody does sort of keep things separate. It's this
Yes.
idea of, in the minute you, even as in art, if I bring anything in, most people were open to it. So I got to give my community a lot of credit. But you would get those people like, I don't want the woo woo. Okay, why is it woo woo? What I just said, it's not really woo woo. You know what I mean? But it's that type of. But I really believe now that humanity is on the cusp of being ready for a whole new everything. And those of us who are called to share what we've learned, share, we're just a little bit out in front of the next person, right? But if we share it, it allows everybody else. And then the person that's out in front of me, I'm listening to, and then I'm allowing to continue to go through and expand. So it's like that connectivity that I think we
Right.
all, benefit from.
I agree. And I think the more we learn this process of saying yes to what's happening, like I like to call it saying yes to your soul. Like that's what I asked last season, right? What's it mean to say yes to your soul? Which is the same idea as
Yes.
expanding into a new story. But it is definitely this way that it's integrating. So I would love for you to say a little bit more about how does all this like ancient and new and anthropology and art and so how I want you to talk a little bit about these integrations because you've studied and explored in a lot of areas that are generally what, like you said, separate realities. But I
Yes.
would
Yes.
like you to talk about how they come together.
That's a good question. And really, they do in that what I've discovered is the more I study the past, the more it leads me back to the present. And what I mean by that is that we sort of feel like as a civilization, we're the most advanced than's ever been before on the planet. Because we take advancement and connect it with technology, because we have more technology, this thing and that thing, we're more advanced. And then when we start dealing with some of the problems the challenges we're having around mass conscious thinking, and we realize like the work of Jung talking about, we're a part of the mass collective, and that informs who we are and it informs our soul, and he even talked about how the soul exists outside the body, right? So this was being talked about, decades ago. But what's happened, what I've noticed is that the more I go back, the more I see how similar cultures were when they get to this so-called reset, expansion, advance, whatever you want to call it. When it comes back around, they always look the same, And in fact, we aren't the most advanced. There are cultures that were even more advanced than us, let's say spiritually. So maybe not so much technologically, but spiritually were. And so the spiritual part made up for the lack of technology because they were using their bodies as these amazing technological temples that they are. So clairvoyance and telepathy and all the stuff we've been talking about here was more on tap for them. They could
Mhm.
go through the forest and look at a plant or taste it and would tell them everything they needed to know because they were used to having those kind of conversations, right? And so it goes to show that where we are right now, we've been here many, many times before as a humanity, as a, so as a human species. So it's not really new. So, but we can feel disconnected, disjointed, like, oh my God, what do we do now? Because everything's falling apart. We just look back in time and you will see that there's these similarities. So if we go back to these old practices, right? Sitting in stone circles, sitting with your back up against a tree, walking in nature and allowing yourself to interact with nature. These things that our ancestors did, they are actually the things that will ground us and help us to level up as we move through these times. So yeah, your point is well taken. That you know, I even tell people in my community is just to go back a few generations in your own family. What did your great great grandmother do? Like, did anything come down from her that your family still uses? Like for me, my great grandmother was always into castor oil. Castor oil solved every problem for her. But think about it. We're back to that. I mean, how many channels are on YouTube now where it's a million uses for castor oil? So it's like the smallest things will start coming back around. And so we can kind of go back into our own ancestry and just start seeing the smallest little thing that seems insignificant, but it is showing us how we can integrate the past with the present, and how a lot of just stepping into awareness, you might not know it yet, but being present in awareness allows you to give yourself the space to pay attention. And I
Mhm.
and I always say we don't have to know everything. I mean, it's this idea we don't I don't know half of what I'm getting ready to do in the next 6 months, but I have an awareness that I'm going to be present and be available for the shifts as they come.
Right. And that is part of this other way of knowing, which it isn't all just planned out and written on a list.
Precisely.
It is this other level of trust and knowing. And so I would love for you to say a little bit more. How does art play into this for you?
Oh my goodness. This is good because part of where I'm moving is I'm I'm doing the art but bringing the spirituality in. I mean, I've always worked spiritually within my own practices. But where art comes in for everyone is that the art is a part of the right brain creative experience, and it's a part of the sacred feminine. So if we think about it as a visual, the spiral or the labyrinth is feminine, and the maze, the square linear, is the divine masculine. Now, being balanced individuals, we should have both in us. I always say that the twin flame is in us. It's not like this thing outside of us. We're trying to find the other thing. It really is in us. And it's bringing the balance of these two together. So we need to be linear. We need to sort of be able to plan and think things through, but we need that right brain spinning, that spinning, and it's bringing in the more supernatural. It's bringing in the frequencies. It's bringing in the mother. It's bringing in creativity. And but we live in a society where we have been mostly trained left brain. And
Mhm.
art, as you know, has been taken out of so much of the curriculum. So when you say art, people think, oh, I can't draw. It's not even
Mhm.
about that. It
Mhm.
is about exercising that right brain so that you can get used to what that feels like to be able to create. So creating has just a simple, just doing simple collage. Collage is one of the best things for even non-artists to experience because there's so much intuition that starts coming up. Your muse starts talking to you. You start pulling these little images together. You're gluing them down. And before you know, you look at something, you're like, oh my goodness, it's like a map. Like, how did I come up with this, right? Because when we can allow ourselves to go into the right brain and just create, what happens is our parasympathetic system, which is across this part of our body, goes into relaxing because you just start going into relaxation. And that parasympathetic system is what allows the creativity, the right brain to open up. We know when we have fear, flight or fight, what happens? Our stomach clenches, right? Because that's where the sympathetic system is. And for the most part, we've been living in our sympathetic system. Even
Mhm.
when you sit down and try to relax, you're still clenching because learning how to get back into the parasympathetic is something that we really have to retrain our bodies for. But art helps with that. It helps to allow us to, for those inner dialogues to come up. It allows us to move into our part of our brain that allows us to naturally relax, bring in certain healing frequencies. That's the other thing that I've recently come across some studies. If you just allow yourself to go into creativity, you go into a frequency that the body starts healing itself. Like the little things you got going on, it'll start healing it. And I see this a lot in my community. I have women in my community who have chronic illnesses, who have just debilitating pain, and they're always working. They're always in their studio. And I say, how, and they're like, when I'm working, I don't feel the pain. And so I hear this over and over again as compared to people who aren't maybe looking at television, they're not moving around, they're taking their meds, and it's getting worse and worse. So there's a lot of scientific studies around this idea of why the right brain, why creativity, and it's not just about a pretty picture. It really is about regulating our systems.
Yeah. Okay, good. I love that. So tell people a little bit about your free gift of Zen practices, I think it's called.
Yes, yes, yes. So it's an ebook and it's all about pauses. So this year in my community, we went every week, we're doing pauses. And those pauses are all about looking at the time between all of our major things. And what generally we happen is we have a calendar and we have everything set up so that at 8 o'clock I have this, at 9 o'clock, at 2 o'clock I have this. And then the time in between, we're normally preparing for those things. My thing has been through awareness to sit back now, what can we do in those pauses? And it doesn't have to be another activity. Maybe it's, becoming aware of the fact that, wow, I have an hour that I can just sit here and be in awareness about. Even if I'm doing other things, I'm going to do it from the standpoint that I have this time that's present for me. And when we get into this idea of doing the pauses, what I have found out from my community, we've started slowing down time. We seem like we have more time. We've been moving more away from technology, back to reading. Lord, we're even putting CDs in our CD changers again and listen to music off of Spotify. Why? Because there's algorithms and commercials in that stuff. So you listen to a really cool music, a couple of tunes, and all of a sudden, da, 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 and the algorithm changes, and your whole sympathetic system is back to clenching. And so we found that even flipping on a cassette, or a CD, while you're in between, it changes the rhythm, it changes the frequency. So now you have a different perspective between that time period because we've come off the digital. This is hugely important. So the gift that I have is an ebook. It takes you through so many weeks of these pauses and suggestions and ways that I've been approaching this. And by the way, this is a conversation for another time, but this whole pause came out of last year around this time where I had a really dark night of the soul. And I was just, I was a mess, you know, um, up at 3 o'clock in the morning, just in nuts. And I had to do something. And that's, the mother said, oh, like, let's start looking at some of this stuff. We need to pause. As you say, we need to pause. And then I started thinking about that and it kind of came out of that. So that's the gift. And I encourage everyone to go on it. You'll enjoy it.
Good. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you said you went through a dark night of the soul and that's what came out because,
Yeah.
I just had this conversation with another speaker like that. Our suffering becomes our wisdom, our
Yeah.
struggles turn into our wisdoms, and that
Yeah.
is how we grow as humans. It is
Mhm.
what gives us our uniqueness, our vision. So I love that you just even
Yeah.
mentioned without the full story that it came out of how you got yourself back up because
It really was,
we really have to be able to do that.
yes, we do. I mean that any type of struggle, if we approach it from the standpoint of, um, what is this trying to tell me? But I didn't even know what it was trying to tell me. Ultimately, I've begun to understand, but I just think we just ask, what am I being shown? Like we don't even have any instant answers. Like, oh, I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to hurry and do this. I mean, no. Sometimes we just have to experience it, and then
Right.
keep on asking ourselves, okay, what is this trying to show me?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, leave us with the last thought or two before we wrap up.
What I'm hearing Gaia say right now is all of our answers can be found by going inside, literally. When sometimes just sitting down, closing your eyes, and go inside of yourself. Even if a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go inside of myself and I'll just tunnel down into the earth, just using my root chakra, just send a um a tap root down into the planet and just sit there. Go inside. We're so used to looking outside of ourselves for solutions, and go inside, and it's amazing the calmness will happen when we start looking for our solutions inside of ourselves. It's just like that plant or that tree. We will get answers.
I love this little wisdom because I think that's part of what this whole expanding into a new story is all about, is this other kind of listening, is not always looking outside ourselves. So,
Mm-mm.
Robyn, thank you so much for the wondrousness you do and bring to the world. I just love it. And it's just a delight to have you back. And what I always say in farewell, everybody, is remember to go out in the world and share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Bye, folks.
Thank you.